I looked out at my 10-acre property and saw three strangers with laser scopes and tripods. They told me my land now belonged to their HOA for a community pool. I showed them the deed. They showed me a forged map. So I went back to my house, grabbed my Remington, and gave them 30 seconds to get off my land. This is how a war starts. Let me rewind to that morning. It was quiet, peaceful. The kind of morning you take for granted until it's ripped away from you. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when I saw them. It was early, still cool enough that the morning dew clung to the tall grass. I stood by the side of the shed, watching the mist roll lazily down the hill behind my house when I caught that first flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. Three men, neon vests, tool belts, slowly making their way across the upper ridge of my land like they owned the damn place. I didn't recognize any of them, and I sure as hell hadn't hired anyone. At first, I thought maybe they were with the county, a routine check, but that thought died fast. They weren't anywhere near the easement or the official fence line. There were no city trucks, no permits posted on the gate, just some strangers with expensive equipment stomping through my field like they were prepping it for a movie set. I walked up the hill, my work boots crunching on the dry soil, the coffee in my thermos sloshing with each determined step. As I got closer, I could hear them talking, tossing around words like coordinates and benchmarks. One of them, a heavy-set guy with a sunburnt neck, looked up as I approached. A Harper Engineering Group logo was stitched onto his vest. "Morning," I said flatly, my voice cutting through the quiet air. "Mind telling me what the hell you're doing on my land?" The heavy-set guy blinked, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "We're with Harper Engineering, doing initial topo measurements for the C4 expansion. Future site of a community pool and parking access." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the absurdity of his statement hang in the air, then shook my head. "You're not listening. This is my land." Another guy, younger, maybe in his early 30s, stepped forward, holding a folder like it was a shield. "We got authorization, sir. It's all been approved by Green Peaks Reserve HOA." I almost laughed. The sound caught in my throat, a bitter mix of disbelief and rising anger. "I'm not a part of your HOA." He turned the folder around and showed me a large color map. It was detailed, professional, and a complete fabrication. According to the updated zoning map filed with the county, this entire slope, what's marked here as Parcel C, is now allocated for public infrastructure expansion. "Your structure's right here," he said, tapping a red box where my mother's house sat. "Access road goes here. Community lot will go here." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. My eyes flickered from the fraudulent map to the man's earnest face and back again. "Where did you get this?" "It's part of the Green Peaks Reserve Expansion Development Plan, signed off by their legal team. They told us it was cleared with the county." "The hell it is," I muttered, taking a step back. The ground beneath my feet suddenly felt less solid. "This land has been mine for 6 years. 10 acres. I bought it cash, ran the survey myself before I signed. I know damn well what the county has on record. Sir, if there's a mistake, you'll have to take it up with the HOA. We were just given the work orders." Something inside me clicked. It wasn't hot anger, not at first. It was a cold, surgical clarity, the kind that settles in behind your eyes right before the storm hits. I turned without another word and walked back down the hill, past the chicken coop, past the neatly stacked firewood, and into the house. The Remington was right where I left it, in the cabinet behind the door, cleaned and oiled from the last hunting season. I didn't chamber a shell, just slung it over my shoulder and walked back up the hill, slow and steady. I stopped at the edge of the field, right where their tire tracks scarred my property, and planted myself between them and my home. "You've got 30 seconds to get off my land," I said calmly, my voice carrying easily in the still morning air. "Or I'll be calling this in as armed trespassing." The young guy paled. The older one immediately put up both hands. "No need for that. We didn't mean any harm. Just doing our jobs." 20 seconds. They scattered fast. One of them tripped over his own tripod. Another fumbled with his tablet case, dropping it in the dust before scrambling after his van. Tires spun up gravel as their 2 trucks bounced down the slope and back onto the paved community road. But the last guy, the heavy-set one, He lingered for a moment. Before he climbed into the passenger seat, he looked at me with something that almost looked like guilt. He leaned across the open door and said, just loud enough for me to hear it, "This wasn't our call. They sent us. You should check your records." They already filed something with the county. Their tires spun gravel as they fled. But that cold, surgical clarity? It was now a boiling rage. The Remington hung heavy on my shoulder. My coffee was cold, and a sharp knot was already tightening in my gut. They thought they could just redraw the lines on a map and take what wasn't theirs. But I had the truth on paper. Or at least, I thought I did. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I drove straight to the one place that could settle this, the county recorder's office. I had the notarized deeds. I had the surveys. I had the truth. But what I learned in that windowless room proved I was fighting a much bigger monster than I realized. The system itself had been poisoned. I parked outside the old brick structure, hands clenched on the wheel like I was about to throttle the entire building. It looked more like a library than the place where entire lives could be rewritten with a few keystrokes and a rubber stamp. I remembered finalizing the purchase here 6 years back, clear as glass. I had the paper copies, notarized, stamped, sealed, and filed away in 2 separate safes. I had proof. I walked straight to the reception desk and gave my name. The woman behind the counter squinted at her screen, tapped a few keys, then blinked. "Just a moment, Mr. West. I need to get someone from Land Records." That didn't sit right. A simple records request should have been just that simple. She should have just printed a copy and sent me on my way. Instead, I ended up in a windowless room with a man named Greg. His shirt was too tight for his gut, his tie too loose for a government employee, and his tone made it clear he'd rather be anywhere else. According to our system, he said, scrolling lazily down his monitor, the parcel known as Lot 742, current boundary 10 acres, was temporarily assigned to Grain Peaks Reserve Homeowners Association under the provisions of Administrative Transfer Code 12B, pending ownership clarification. My jaw tightened. What the hell does that mean? He raised an eyebrow like I'd just asked him what a stapler was. It means your property has been reclassified under provisional oversight of the HOA pending verification of rightful ownership. I am the rightful owner, I said, the words coming out like chips of ice. He shrugged, a small, dismissive gesture that set my teeth on edge. That's not reflected in the current system. Your original deed's been flagged as in review due to an administrative challenge. 14 simple words. 14 words that erased 6 years of my life and turned my reality into a suggestion. That's nonsense. Who challenged it? He clicked twice. The request was submitted by the HOA's legal department. They claimed that your parcel was mistakenly excluded from the 2010 land reservation when the development was approved. Said you might be a successor to an improperly recorded trustee. My fists clenched under the table. You do realize that's a lie, right? I purchased that land directly from the Harold family. I've got the sale agreement, the recorded deed, tax payments for every year, GPS surveys. Hell, I even have drone footage dating back years. Greg looked like he didn't want to deal with any of this. I don't adjudicate disputes, Mr. West. All I can do is flag your file for an internal audit and escalate the issue. That'll trigger a review by zoning and legal. How long does that take? Could be days, weeks maybe. Depends on how backlogged they are. Weeks. While strangers with bulldozers in their eyes were trampling over my land, the official process was weeks. I forced my voice to stay even cold. Fine. Start the audit. And I want a printed copy of every request filed by the HOA. Name, signature, date, and all attached maps. He hesitated for a second, then nodded. I can do that. I left with a thick manila envelope under my arm and my blood pressure high enough to kill a horse. As I stepped out into the oppressive afternoon heat, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if they were already doing more than just measuring? I hauled us back to my property faster than I'd care to admit. As I pulled into the gravel drive, I noticed something was off. The mailbox door was bent, hanging open at an unnatural angle. Papers were littered on the ground like autumn leaves, bills, junk mail, a flyer about propane deliveries, and then, among them, the torn edges of something important. A copy of the land assessment from 2 years back, ripped clean in half. Someone had gone through my mail. I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. Not even the damn squirrels. But the fence post near the east side was chipped, the wood splintered. The latch on the gate was twisted halfway off its hinges. I didn't waste a second. I pulled the memory cards from my trail cans, rewound the last few hours of footage, and there it was. Grainy, black and white footage of a figure in a windbreaker and a baseball cap crouching at my mailbox, digging through it, then running like a coward when a car passed by on the main road. No HOA uniform, no logo, no ID. Just some bastard thinking they were clever. I spent the next few hours like a man on a mission. I reinforced the locks on the house, installed fresh cameras covering every angle of the property, swapped out the batteries in the old ones, and posted laminated signs on every gate. Private land, not HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And just to make a point, I parked my ATV on the rise near the back fence and left the Remington strapped across the front rack in plain view. Let them come again. Let them try to dig through my life with a smile and a clipboard. They had already played their first hand. Now it was my turn. 2 days later, I was filling up at the Sinclair station when I got the call from my neighbor, Rhonda. "Jack," she said, her voice tight with alarm. "There's a bulldozer on your property." I nearly dropped the gas nozzle. By the time I screeched into my driveway, the dust cloud from my truck hadn't even settled. The sun was high, burning down on the slope. And right there, parked bold as brass near the eastern fence line, was a full-size yellow cat dozer, its engine still rumbling. 2 guys in hard hats were pulling brush and small trees from around the creek bed. Another stood near the edge of my land, motioning to a chalk-sprayed outline that ran straight across my vegetable patch. I slammed the truck door so hard it bounced back open. They didn't even look up. I didn't yell, didn't ask questions. I just stormed into the house, went straight to the gun safe, and grabbed the Remington. I was tired of playing nice. You don't reason with people who think your life's work is just a formality. But before I even made it to the back porch, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. 2 sheriff's cruisers were sliding onto my property like it was a damn parade ground. Doors flew open. One of them, Deputy Whelan, a guy I'd met once during a noise complaint years back, was already drawing his weapon. "Jack, put the gun down," he shouted, his voice strained. "Step away from the firearm." I froze mid-step, the stock of the rifle in my hands. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted back, my voice raw with disbelief. "They're tearing up my land." Whelan advanced, his hands still hovering near his holster. "We got a report of an armed threat to construction workers. Put the gun down now. They're not construction workers. They're trespassing." "According to dispatch," he said, moving closer, his eyes locked on mine. "This is an authorized development site under Green Peaks Reserve HOA. They have documentation. They have lies." I barked. "I've got the damn deed inside the house. This isn't theirs to touch." The second deputy was already talking into his radio, his eyes on me, tension thick enough to choke. I slowly, deliberately set the Remington down on the porch railing, the barrel pointed safely at the sky. "I've got cameras," I said, my voice shaking now, not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated fury. "They cut through my fence. Look at the property line. Look at the survey markers. This is my land, and I've got every inch on record." Whelan didn't reply. He motioned for the workers to hold their positions. They looked hesitant, one of them actually backing up toward the dozer cab like he was ready to bolt. Then Whelan spoke again, quieter this time. "Jack, I get that you're upset, but if there's a legal dispute, you need to take it through the courts. Right now, these guys have a temporary development authority issued by the HOA. Until that's challenged officially, I can't remove them." I stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "So what?" "They wave a piece of paper, and that means they can dig up 10 acres of private property. I don't make the rules, man. File the complaint. Get a judge to freeze the work. But right now, you step back." I looked over at the dozer. One of the workers was on his phone, clearly rattled. I stood there, helpless, watching a machine tear apart my life. The vegetables I grew for my table crushed into the dirt. And the mulberry tree. I planted that sapling the year after we lost Mom. It was a living memory of her. And now it was just splinters. That wasn't dirt they were digging up. It was my history. The blue marking tape trailed through the wreckage like veins, each one a wound. I picked up the Remington slowly, popped the shell out, and laid the rifle flat across the porch table. "I'll play it your way," I said, my voice low and dangerous. For now. Once the deputies were gone, and the crew returned to their digging, slower now and glancing over their shoulders every minute, I went inside and pulled the memory card from my new drone. I'd sent it up early that morning to check for fresh tracks, and by sheer luck, it had captured the entire arrival. The dozer pushing through my north fence line, one guy using bolt cutters, another hauling in signage that read Future Community Amenity Zone. I sent it all to my lawyer, Daniel, along with photos, time-stamped videos, and a full summary of the encounter with the deputies. By nightfall, Daniel had filed an emergency injunction in county court. Violation of private property, destruction of real assets, unlawful expansion without consent. The paperwork was heavy, but the evidence was crystal clear. Later that evening, I sat on the porch, watching the horizon burn red behind the hill. The dozer had gone silent, parked for the night, but it sat there like a sleeping beast, a constant threat. Its scoop was lowered as if it was waiting to take another bite out of my life. I reached for my coffee, cold again, and caught movement on the camera feed. A car pulling up to the edge of the HOA road. A man in a suit stepped out, looked directly at my house, and took a photo with his phone before driving off. I stared at the screen. I didn't know who he was, but he knew exactly where to look. I thought the legal fight was the battle. I was wrong. The real darkness came at 2 a.m. It started with my dog, Mabel. She doesn't bark at shadows. She's not like other mutts who get spooked by squirrels or their own tail. When she barks, it means someone is where they shouldn't be. And that night, she was growling at a very real threat lurking in the shed, trying to steal the one thing that proved my case. It was close to 2 o'clock in the morning when I heard that growl, low and rumbling like a diesel engine warming up. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and pulled up the camera feeds on my phone. Back pasture, nothing. Chicken coop, quiet. Front gate, clear. But the shed, the feed from the motion camera glitched for a second. Then I saw it. Movement. Someone had slipped inside. I didn't waste time. I threw on my boots, grabbed the Remington, and slid out the side door. No headlights, no sound but crickets and the wind whispering through the pines. I kept the flashlight low, its beam sweeping the ground as I moved silently across the gravel, stepping carefully around the tomato beds and stacked lumber. When I reached the shed, the heavy padlock was hanging open, broken. The door was ajar, creaking faintly in the breeze. Inside, the air smelled like motor oil and damp wood. The tools were where I left them. The old TV was untouched. But the small, fireproof cabinet in the back, where I kept the original deed, the survey maps, the zoning letters, had been jimmied open. It wasn't even subtle. The pry marks were fresh and deep. One drawer was half hanging out, papers scattered across the concrete floor. I heard the rustle behind me a half-second too late. By the time I turned, the bastard was already sprinting into the dark, vaulting the fence at the rear of the property like a damn gymnast. Hoodie, black pants, maybe 5'10". No logo, no car waiting that I could see. Just the sound of boots pounding dirt into silence. I didn't fire. I thought about it, but my gut said no. Better to have evidence than a body. I called it in. A sheriff's deputy came out, took a report, and pretended to be surprised. I showed him the camera footage, the pry marks, the fact that nothing of value was stolen, just rifled through. He nodded like he'd seen it 100 times before. "Looks like someone wanted documents," he said with a straight face. "No shit," I replied. By breakfast, I was already changing every lock on the property and installing a wireless offsite backup to cloud storage. If they wanted to make the paper disappear now, they'd have to erase a whole damn server farm. Then, just before noon, I got an email. No subject line, just an address in the body and the words, "I'm not part of this. Please come alone." It was sent from a burner domain, but the address was real. An office park near the edge of town. Something about it felt off, but I couldn't ignore it. Not after what had happened the night before. I took the Glock this time, tucked under my shirt, and drove in silence. The building was dull gray, 2 stories, mostly occupied by lawyers and realtors. I knocked on the office marked Foster and Anth, Lee, HOA counselors, and a woman opened the door just enough to peek through. "You're Jack West," she whispered. I nodded. She stepped aside and motioned me in. "My name's Jen Walker. I'm a paralegal. I've been working under Karen Worthington for the last 5 years." I waited. She looked nervous, wringing her hands, her eyes darting toward the hallway. I didn't know how far she was going until last week. "They faked it, Jack. All of it. The rezoning request, the claim about the land inclusion. It's all manufactured. She used an old inheritance dispute as a justification to flag your title." "I already figured that out," I said coldly. "You got proof." She nodded and slid a small flash drive across the desk. Screenshots, emails, voice memos. She instructed one of the engineers to prepare for physical resistance in case the owner got involved. She even drafted a fake deed transfer using a signature they pulled from your original escrow documents. I didn't respond. I just took the drive. "She's planning to move forward even if the court delays things," Jen added, her voice barely a whisper. She said, and I quote, "By the time anyone untangles this mess, the pool will be halfway done. What's your angle in all this?" I asked, my eyes fixed on hers. "I can't be a part of this. I tried to flag it internally. I got threatened with termination and character defamation. I've got bills to pay, but I've got a conscience too." I stood up and looked her in the eyes. "You realize you just became the star witness in a felony case." She gave a sad, small smile. Better that than an accessory to theft. I drove straight to Daniel's office. We backed up the drive, printed every file, and cataloged each attachment. The voice memos alone were enough to cook Karen Worthington to a crisp. We could hear her laughing about bulldozing the hillbilly holdout and mucking the permit system as paperwork for peasants. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the county court had issued a temporary restraining order, halting all activity on my property. No bulldozers, no tape, no foot traffic. One warning for a violation, and the HOA would face contempt charges. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the stars blink into existence one by one. Across the road, the construction lights didn't come on. The injunction had slowed them down, but I knew it hadn't stopped them. By Monday morning, someone had peeled off the county-issued restraining order I'd stapled to the front gate and replaced it with a smug little HOA-branded notice. Community Improvement Initiative Phase 1. Authorized construction resumes 8 a.m. I took a picture and sent it to Daniel. Then I went to war. We filed a formal lawsuit against Green Peaks Reserve HOA, Karen Worthington personally, and Harper Engineering Group for unlawful encroachment, destruction of property, falsification of public records, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. The suit was heavy. Over 300 pages of evidence, all neatly indexed. Emails, forged maps, aerial footage, witness statements. Daniel called it a battering ram in PDF form. But we knew it wouldn't be enough. Not in this county. Not when Karen Worthington sat on 3 development boards and played golf with half the judges. So I made it public. A friend of mine from the VFW had a cousin who ran a property rights podcast called Land and Liberty Weekly. Within 24 hours, they ran my story under the title, HOA from Hell, Colorado Veteran Faces Land Theft by HOA Execs. The clip went viral. Emails started pouring in from others across the state who'd had similar battles with their HOAs. One woman in Durango said her HOA paved half her front lawn for emergency parking without her consent. A rancher near Boulder said they'd tried to rezone his hayfield into a dog park. Most of them had settled quietly, but no one had fought back like this. I knew I was stirring the pot, but I didn't expect what happened next. The HOA board met that Friday night behind closed doors. Karen expected a unanimous vote to continue development under legal review. Instead, something cracked. Thomas Gardner, a retired civil engineer and longtime HOA board member, stood up and demanded a full audit of all development contracts signed under Karen's tenure. Word got out. Emails leaked. Meeting minutes found their way into the hands of a local blogger who published a damning breakdown of HOA corruption patterns. And then, Gardner knocked on my door. He was wearing a windbreaker and a guilty expression. He said he'd been on the board since its founding, that he'd trusted Karen for too long, and that he'd seen the signs but had looked the other way. Now he wanted to make it right. She had us signing land use memos without context, he said, his voice heavy with regret. She buried amendments inside unrelated budget motions. I signed half those things without reading past the title. He handed me a folder filled with copies of internal memos from 3 years back. One of them explicitly referenced the proactive inclusion of adjacent, undeclared parcels under the 2010 expansion mandate. My parcel, she told us it was county policy, Gardner said, told us it was all being rectified retroactively. I didn't realize we were taking land. He offered to testify. We added his statement to the lawsuit. The pressure was working. Karen's name started showing up in neighborhood group chats, usually accompanied by snake emojis. Some residents began demanding a recall. A few even offered to help with my legal fees, which I declined. But the gesture meant something. The HOA signs were vandalized overnight. One had the words "Jack was here" spray-painted across it in bold black letters. Not me, obviously, but I didn't mind the credit. Daniel got word that Harper Engineering had entered panic mode. Their counsel tried to negotiate a settlement. Quietly, off the record. We declined. We're not settling, I told him. We're exposing. The court scheduled a hearing, not the final trial, but the first real showdown. The press were notified, and to my surprise, the story was picked up by a regional station, Channel 7 News. They wanted to interview me on the property. I cleaned the porch and shaved for the first time in a week. That evening, standing in front of my mangled fence and the empty footprint where the mulberry tree used to be, I looked straight into the camera and said, "This land isn't just mine because I bought it. It's mine because I fought for it. And if they think they can bully people into giving up what's theirs, they're going to learn the hard way. Some of us don't fold." The courthouse smelled like old carpet and fear. The kind of building where the air conditioner never quite works and every light flickers like it's debating retirement. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my tie knotted too tight, my collar as stiff as drywall, my hands folded on a stack of paper that could crush a man if dropped from high enough. Across the aisle, Karen Worthington sat with her arms crossed, wearing a designer blazer like it could protect her from facts. Her lawyer, some shark from Denver named Clevenger, looked like he'd eaten paralegals for breakfast. They weren't smiling anymore. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, and HOA members who suddenly didn't know where to sit. One of them whispered to another, "I thought this was just about a pool." They had no idea. The judge, an older woman with a reputation for zero tolerance toward legal theater, gavelled in at 9 sharp. West versus Grain Peaks Reserve HOA. Plaintiff, proceed. Daniel stood, calm and deliberate. He laid out the core facts in less than 10 minutes. I owned the land legally. The HOA had tried to seize it through a falsified administrative claim. Construction had begun illegally. Our evidence included the original deeds, time-stamped footage, and testimony from internal whistleblowers. Then came the witnesses. First up was Jen Walker. She looked different in court, her hair tied back, a suit that seemed too big for her frame, but her voice never wavered. She testified to everything: the fake land inclusion memo, Karen's orders to deal with the delay, the plan to exhaust me legally until I folded. She laughed about it, Jen said under oath. She said he'd give up once the bulldozer touched the foundation. I watched Karen flinch for the first time. Then came Thomas Gardner. He sat up straight, his voice thick with guilt. I signed off on 3 resolutions I didn't read. Karen told us it was routine, county-aligned paperwork. I didn't question it. I should have. Mr. West's parcel was never part of our original plan. It was added later, through legal sleight of hand. Then came the forensic analyst, our expert who had reviewed the so-called deed of relinquishment the HOA tried to submit. He pointed to inconsistencies in the signature, the ink pressure, the printer metadata. "This document is a forgery," he said plainly. "It was compiled using scans from older escrow documents, manipulated digitally, and then backdated." The room went still. You could hear the bailiff's pen click. Then came the big one. Footage from my drone, synced with the body cam audio from Deputy Whelan's visit. On the screen, the court watched a bulldozer roll through my fence while I screamed about private property and a deputy told me to take it to court. Clevenger objected. The judge overruled. I watched Karen lean toward him, whispering something that sounded like panic. Then Daniel called the final witness, a junior zoning clerk from the county, who testified that the HA's request for administrative transfer had been flagged as suspicious internally, but was pushed through after a private lunch between Karen and the head of zoning. The judge leaned back in her chair. She didn't even ask for a recess. Her ruling came down like thunder. The HA's administrative claims were invalidated. All construction permits tied to the parcel were revoked. Karen Worthington was found liable for conspiracy to defraud, falsification of public records, and intentional abuse of administrative process. Harper Engineering's license was suspended pending a full review. Damages awarded to me, $3.2 million, including punitive damages and full legal costs. A criminal referral was sent to the district attorney's office. Karen didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared at the floor as the bailiff took her phone and whispered instructions about upcoming arraignment dates. The room didn't cheer. This wasn't a movie. But when I stepped out into the hallway, I saw people nodding. Some shook my hand. One woman, elderly, maybe 80, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You just made it safer for all of us." Spring came late that year. Colorado weather is a stubborn beast, snow in April, sunstroke by May. But eventually, the frost gave up and the ground softened enough for me to rebuild. The first thing I did was tear down the old split-rail fence. Not because I had to, but because I wanted it gone. Every splinter was a reminder of how close they came to taking what was mine. In its place, I put up something a bit more expressive. I hired a local welder, a veteran like me, who specialized in custom ironwork. What he built was a towering black wrought iron gate with curved scrolls and a thick horizontal bar across the center. Dead center, bolted in polished steel, was a sign that read, "Private land, not subject to HOA. Trespassers will be prosecuted." And just below it, smaller and hand-engraved on a little brass plate, "Smile for the drones." By mid-May, the wildflowers came back. The dirt path where the bulldozer had torn through now bloomed with Indian paintbrush and lupin. I replanted the mulberry tree too. It wasn't as tall as the old one, but it'll get there. The victory was sweet, but the scars remained. The money came in installments, and it meant security, sure. After legal fees, I still had enough to pay off the house, upgrade the solar array, and fund a full rebuild of the shed with proper insulation and a surveillance system that could probably see into Kansas. But it was never about the money. It was about the principle. It was about rebuilding that mulberry tree and knowing that some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. And for Karen Worthington? Let's just say her new HOA has much stricter rules and far less golf. She pled down. Fraud, obstruction, falsification. 15 years, no parole for the first 7. She wept during her sentencing. I didn't attend. I couldn't bring myself to care. But I heard through the grapevine that she's not adjusting well to life without catered HOA brunches and her little golf cart. Harper Engineering folded. Their board resigned. Thomas Gardner took over as interim president of what was left of the HOA and then moved to dissolve it entirely. He said it had outlived its mandate and its trust. I sent him a bottle of good bourbon with a note that just said, "This one's legal." Jen got out clean. She started her own consulting business helping homeowners fight back against rogue HOAs. I wrote the first review on her website. 5 stars. Helped me keep my land. Didn't get shot. Would hire again. The funniest part? A month after the ruling, someone spray-painted "Don't Tread on Me" on the HOA Community Center's garage door. They blamed me for it. I didn't do it. I wanted to, but I didn't. Instead, I painted that same phrase on the front of my own porch, just under the eaves. Black letters, bold font. Every morning now, I sit out there with my coffee, Mabel snoring at my feet, the birds arguing in the pines, and I watch the road. Sometimes cars slow down. Some neighbors wave, some just stare. One day, a family from out of town pulled up in a minivan and asked if the property was for rent. Not unless you're a bulldozer, I said. Then we charged double. They laughed and drove off. I stayed there for a while, watching the wind move through the grass on land that was mine yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I smiled for the drone.